Lots to cover, but first, some news. President Trump addressed the nation Wednesday night, outlining the administration's steps in response to the coronavirus, which has now been declared a global pandemic by the World Health Organization. The president announced a ban on travelers to the United States coming from Europe, with a few exceptions. He also outlined some financial stimulus designed to mitigate the effects of the pandemic on American workers and the U.S. economy. I'll have more on this with Steve Forbes in my next segment. And after 2 days of hearings in the Australian capital city of Canberra, a 7-member panel of justices will take more time to consider, or reconsider rather, the case of Cardinal George Pell. Cardinal Pell is serving a 6-year jail sentence after being convicted in December of 2018 on 5 charges of sexually abusing 2 choir boys as Archbishop of Melbourne after Sunday Mass in the city's St. Patrick's Cathedral in 1996 and 97. Legal experts and supporters of Cardinal Pell are quietly confident he could be acquitted soon, possibly as early as next week, after Australia's highest court deferred ruling on his appeal. The case could still be sent back to a lower court in Victoria, where the earlier trials were held, but legal sources say there is almost zero appetite and zero likelihood of that happening. We will keep an eye on this story as it develops. And the coronavirus has also affected the way Catholic parishes around the nation and the world are conducting daily masses. The U.S. bishops have issued recommendations that include refraining from holding hands during the Lord's Prayer, ceasing the distribution of the chalice with the precious blood, receiving communion in the hand instead of the tongue, and not shaking hands during the sign of peace. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan was particularly emphatic about this point last weekend.
Let's offer each other a sign of peace.
Let's not. All right? We're not supposed to with this, with the cautions going on.
Sadly, New York also announced the cancellation of the city's annual St. Patrick's Day parade, a hallmark of Catholic life in the Big Apple. Lots of changes happening to all of our lives and the way we conduct it. Joining me now with analysis of the pandemic's effect on the economy, his thoughts on the 2020 presidential race, and more, is the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, former presidential candidate and host of the new podcast, What's Ahead. Please welcome Steve Forbes. Steve, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you. Thank you, Raymond.
Now, this coronavirus is beginning to have a massive effect on certain sectors in the economy. I want to start with what the president said to the nation on Wednesday night. Watch.
This is not a financial crisis. This is just a temporary moment of time that we will overcome together as a nation and as a world. Tonight, I am announcing the following additional actions. I am instructing the Small Business Administration to exercise available authority to provide capital and liquidity to firms affected by the coronavirus. Using emergency authority, I will be instructing the Treasury Department to defer tax payments without interest or penalties for certain individuals and businesses negatively impacted. Finally, I am calling on Congress to provide Americans with immediate payroll tax relief.
Steve, part of what the president is proposing here to rebalance the economy is a payroll tax cut, financial aid for workers stricken by the virus, aid to small businesses, and a Buy American executive order. Is that enough to calm the market and stabilize this economy?
I think what the markets are waiting for, is what actually will emerge after you get through the Democrats in the House of Representatives. And the payroll tax cut, which makes all the sense in the world, we did it in 2011, 2012 for 2 years, slicing off 2 points each year, and had some good effects on the economy. But the Democrats, for strange reasons, are opposing it. And then, two, you have the desire of some to attach non-germane pieces to this thing, make it a Christmas tree. So if it focuses on increasing the Small Business Administration to make loans to small businesses, helping out, which is going to happen to certain of the industries that have been slammed by this thing, and a few other measures, I think the markets would heave a sigh of relief and say, good. But the fear is some of these so-called temporary measures will become permanent. The Democrats want to, for example, have a mandate that every company offer sick leave including small businesses, which really are not in a position to do it. So if they go straight to dealing with the immediate emergency, extending unemployment benefits and the like, the payroll tax cut, I think you'd see the markets rebound.
Yeah. Steve, there was a report today that I saw where apparently Speaker Pelosi tried to slip in an abortion slush fund to do away with the Hyde Amendment so the government would be funding abortions as part of the relief package. I mean, this kind of thing means it's going to be dead on arrival. And the question is, will you be able to get the Republicans and Democrats working on a cohesive package that's sensible and that truly benefits the workers that are being affected by this virus?
Well, Vice President Biden, former Vice President Biden on Thursday, as we speak, was making a speech saying what he would have done as president.
Right.
Some of the things are sensible, such as emergency hospital beds and the like, temporary. But clearly they're making it a partisan issue. And so I think what it's going to be dependent on in the next few days and few weeks is public opinion putting pressure on Washington and saying, stop this partisanship, let's get a bill. And if that bill includes a payroll tax cut, the nice thing about a payroll tax cut is every working person, anyone who gets a paycheck, gets an increase in pay because the payroll tax hits at $1, not at the thresholds as you do with the income tax. So those individuals in the workforce who don't pay income tax would still get relief on this thing. And if they focus on helping businesses, helping those businesses and industries that have been slammed, and emergency measures like that, I think you'd have public support for it and it would sail through. But the idea with an election year, sadly, the temptation to go in for political gimmickry is going to be, sadly, for some irresistible. So it's going to depend on how well the president does. But also, too, I think what you're seeing is Vice President Pence is getting increased public recognition and authority. I've had some Democrats say, oh, I didn't realize he was such a capable individual. He's coming across very well. So if public opinion turns to get that payroll tax cut done, I think you'll see this thing finally pass, not because the politicians want to do it, because the public wants it to get done.
Yeah. Steve, you mentioned Biden and his alternative address to the nation on Thursday. In it, he said this.
But neither should we panic or fall back on xenophobia. Labeling COVID-19 a foreign virus does not displace accountability for the misjudgments that have been taken thus far by the Trump administration. Banning all travel from Europe or any other part of the world may slow it, but as we've seen, it will not stop it.
Steve, your reaction to this idea that the president is somehow engaged in xenophobia vis-a-vis the coronavirus?
Well, it's a fact that the virus started in China last fall, and so his travel ban was perfectly justified. And in Europe, even the WHO and others are saying it's now the epicenter of the disease. It's gone from China, Asia to Europe. So a travel ban makes all the sense in the world. Now, you can argue, should it have included the UK or some other areas? Fine. That's a legitimate debate. But the idea that we should have a temporary ban makes all the sense in the world. And the thing is, the one area where we did fall down on was our Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta really botched the initial measures to have testing.
Right.
They knew back in December this was a problem. Yet here we are, almost 3 months later, and only now are we beginning to get any number of testing kits out there, diagnostic kits. And if we had had those by the millions by now, which we were perfectly capable of having done, we wouldn't even have a panic. We'd know who has it, where it's at, and be able to take laser-like measures to deal with it instead of the shotgun approach we're forced to now.
Yeah, and the president apparently cut a lot of regulations and red tape to move those tests forward and to get them created.
One of the first things Vice President Biden did, Vice President Pence at the end of February, was get the CD off its duff, get it off of its turf-mindedness, and say, bring in the private labs, remove these crazy restrictions, And we're now finally going to get some kits that we should have had 2 or 3 months ago.
Mr. Forbes, we're seeing particular industries hit hard by this pandemic. Schools, universities are canceling classes, extending spring break. Large and lucrative cultural events are being called off. The Houston Rodeo, Austin, South by Southwest, NBA has been suspended. How can the economy withstand these kind of hits? And if this spread is not contained soon and continues for months, what do you see happening to the economy?
Well, the economy is going to definitely take a hit when you have these cancellations and the like. The energy industry is reeling, not only because of slowing economies, but this crazy war that Saudi Arabia and Russia have gotten themselves into for their own ridiculous reasons, mistaken reasons. You have obviously anything to do with tourism. You look at hotel rooms now, they're a fraction of what they were a few days ago. And yes, so there's really going to be blood on the floor, sadly. But the thing is, I think now we're going to be able to contain the disease in the months ahead when we have these diagnostic kits going, so we know actually what is happening. Right. And this thing eventually peters out. One of the things that I think you're going to then focus on is trying to get better ways of dealing with the disease, because it could come back in the fall. And eventually we'll have an actually vaccine for it. But once people realize that this thing is under control, tragic though it may have been going through it, the economy will quickly recover. What's amazing is when you look at the economic statistics for January and much of February, this economy was starting to really pick up steam again. Yeah. Investment was starting to rise again. Incomes were going up at a faster pace. So things were starting to move in the right direction. Then this thing came along. So I think once we begin to get this thing behind us, yeah, it'll initially be a little bit slow, but the markets will do it right away. They try to anticipate the future, and the economy will be doing well again. And then, of course, after that, we have to wait for the elections, because if you get a bad result in the elections, all bets are going to be off for 2021.
Yeah, I'm glad that's a great segue, because this pandemic is having an effect on presidential politics. I want to play this bite for you, and then we'll get into it. This is Joe Biden this week in Michigan, engaging with a union worker, and they started talking about the Second Amendment and the former vice president's intention to restrict gun use or put some restrictions on gun ownership. Watch.
You are actively trying to diminish our Second Amendment right and take away our guns.
You're full of
All right, thank you.
No, shush. Shush. I support the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, just like right now, if you yell fire, that's not free speech. And from the very beginning, I have a shotgun, I have a 20 gauge, a 12 gauge, my sons hunt. Guess what? You're not allowed to own any weapon. I'm not taking your gun away at all. You need 100 rounds.
So when you were in Beto, when you said you're going to take our guns,
I did not say that. That's not true. I did not say that.
It's a viral video.
It's a viral video like the other ones they're putting out that are simply a lie.
Steve, you've been a candidate for president. Does this seem like a national candidate who is in full control of his faculties to you?
Well, I think what it demonstrates, and Joe Biden's had a long history of gaffes and doing things you wouldn't expect a candidate to do, is really what does he have the stamina to go through the course? And this is why you're going to see huge attention paid, assuming he goes for the nomination, gets the nomination, on who he picks as vice president, because given his age alone, given the pressures of that office, there are very good odds that he won't be able to complete his first term. Yeah. And because he'll be taking office at an older age than Ronald Reagan was when he left office after 2 terms. Wow. So you're going to see a real focus on the VP-ship and whether Biden can withstand the pressures of a campaign. So that's why Bernie Sanders isn't dropping out. He figures maybe Biden will falter. And you'll notice that that day that Biden blew up at that worker on the gun rights, you notice that evening when he won those victories in Michigan and elsewhere, his victory speech was deliberately slow, calm, like he was on downers. Try to appear statesman-like, and try to overcome the image of him losing it. And he's lost it before when people have questioned him closely. He blows his stack. Right.
Well, the Biden campaign, you know, as you mentioned, you know, there was a convenient effort to avoid more situations like that. And the night of that big primary, what they did was basically cancel the rallies. Now, they did that because Cleveland and Ohio officials asked them to. But then he delivered his victory speech to an empty hall. Now they're saying they'd like to hold virtual events amid the concern about coronavirus. Is this a convenient way of dodging first major debates, major rallies, and allowing the candidate, mainly Joe Biden, to have a rest, take a nap for a little bit?
But the key thing is we have almost 8 months to go, 7.5 months to go before the election. There is no way you can cocoon a candidate for that long of a period of time. You got presidential debates in the fall. If he refuses to engage in those, there are 3 of them scheduled. That's going to tell voters why. We've become accustomed to them over the last few decades. Why are you ducking these? And I think in terms of Bernie Sanders, he's certainly going to be pressing for it. Right. He wants to go head to head. He has socialism's last stand in this primary season. So Biden too is going to have to face the press more. Yep. I mean, whatever you think of Donald Trump, no one can say he ducks the press. In fact, I think his handlers are all pull their hair out. Yeah. He can't resist. He can't resist having a set to with the media, answer questions, and go back and forth. He does it almost every single day.
Before I let you go, it looks like the Democratic establishment and the party is trying to shuffle Bernie Sanders off the stage. Might they be running the risk of alienating Bernie's supporters in a general election and pushing them back into the arms of Donald Trump?
Well, you won't see them, most of them going in the arms of Donald Trump. What you will see, if they feel that they've truly got shafted again, is they just won't vote, or they'll vote for another candidate, throw their vote away on election day to some third-party candidate. But I don't see them voting for Trump. But one less vote for the Democrats is a virtual vote for the Republicans. And this is where we have to be very careful. Democrat disaffection with Hillary Clinton in 2016, you saw the turnout in key areas, especially in the African-American community, fall way below what it was in 2012. And that lack of voter turnout was one of the key factors in her losing the Electoral College, losing the election, losing Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and other states. But you look at the turnout in the primaries this year, especially in Michigan, they were at record turnout. So I think that most Democrats are just going to come out one way or the other. And that's why the establishment figures they can push Joe Biden with all of his flaws, because they just want a body there to be able to take on Donald Trump. But as they say, the game ain't over, or whatever they say about operas. You can't say for politically correct reasons. A certain lady singing at the end.
There you go.
This thing is far, far from over.
It may not be over, Steve, until Biden does one more gaffe. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. But we're going to leave it there.
There are going to be more coming. I guarantee you that.
I agree. Steve Forbes, thank you so much for your insight. You can listen to Steve's new podcast, What's Ahead, at Forbes.com. Thank you again.
Thank you.